I'm a Shul Rabbi, so I like to speak from my podium.
With the microphone?
So I'm so honored to be here on this panel with truly beloved and respected colleagues. And I just met Rabbi Blooming, who I grew up with in Atlanta, Georgia, about 40 years ago. We were a block away from each other. I'm seeing him now for the first time. This has been such an inspiring and impactful conference, and kol hakavod to Richard and to her for doing such a beautiful job. And I want to thank you for inviting me to speak to this distinguished audience. I'm the product of a mixed marriage. My mother is of Ashkenazic descent. My father is of Sephardic descent. My maternal grandparents miraculously survived the Holocaust. My grandmother was taken from her home in Budapest. My grandfather from his home in Sighet. After the war, they went back to their homes, but someone else was living there now. And they said, but this is my house. I paid for this roof, I built that wall. Too bad, they were told. We live here now. My paternal grandparents had a similar experience. Their parents immigrated from Morocco. My grandfather was raised in the old city of Jerusalem. But in 1948, my grandfather and his parents and his siblings were thrown out of their home. After the Six-Day War, he too tried to get back into his house. He had proof. It's my family. We own this house. I'm sorry, we live here now. I want to say the same thing for everyone sitting here. All of our grandparents had a home. It's our home. Our grandfather, Abraham, acquired the first Jewish title. But we were twice exiled en masse from our home. There was always a Jewish presence, but en masse we were exiled. And remarkably, 120 years ago, and 100 years ago, and 70 years ago, a path was paved for all of our grandfathers to once again return to their rightful homes. The Torah tells us again and again, 170 times, it says in Tanakh, that God bequeathed the land of Israel to the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. 12 of those times it stated that it's a covenant that is everlasting. I will give the whole land of Canaan to you and your descendants as an everlasting possession. Our sages tell us, I have a chosen land, I have a chosen people. Let the chosen people dwell in the chosen land. God designated Israel for the Jewish people, not Budapest, not Sighet, not San Diego or Sao Paulo, but Jerusalem, and Hebron, and Yaffo, and Jericho. And the Torah is very specific about the borders of the land of Israel. We live here in this beautiful country, and too many Jews have forgotten about their rightful inheritance. I'll tell you, for me, one of the most memorable moments of this past year was when Rabbi Marvin Heyer delivered the benediction at the inauguration of President Trump. All the world's eyes were on Rabbi Heyer. He had the incredible honor, the first speaker to get up, an Orthodox Jew, right after the newly elected president delivered his address. How did he use his moment in the spotlight? He didn't just offer a blessing. He quoted from Psalms. And what verses did he say? He reminded the world, who are the Jewish people? There were tears in my eyes. He had the courage to say, we were there 2,500 years ago by the rivers of Babylon, and we were crying, mourning over Yerushalayim. If I forget Yerushalayim, let my right hand be forgotten. That's a man with courage, with self-dignity, with pride in his heritage and the history of his people. To me, he was reminding the world we're an ancient people who never forgot our homeland, our inheritance. Obama sitting right behind him, a man who in his final hours despicably enabled the passing of a resolution at the UN stating that the Western Wall is occupied territory. I'm limited on time. I'll just tell you that several months ago I was in Israel for the 50th anniversary of Yom Yerushalayim. And it was an incredible experience, but for me, one of the highlights was to see the opening ceremony flashing there on the old city walls. We're standing outside the Tower of David, I'm sure some of you were there, and you could see scenes of what took place here in Yerushalayim. You saw a scene of Akedat Yitzchak, the binding of Isaac, 3,800 years ago. A scene of Jacob's ladder, 3,700 years ago. A scene of King David, 3,000 years ago. A scene of the destruction of the temple, 2,400 years ago. A scene of the Maccabean revolt, 2,100 years ago. It was extraordinary because it reminded everyone there, 100,000 people, including the Prime Minister and the President of the State of Israel, that our connection to Yerushalayim is not 50 years old. And the State of Israel is not 69 years old. We have a 4,000-year history in Israel. So as much as I love what my fellow panelists said, I just would say that I want to add to that. And we have to treasure our history. This summer I was in Israel, and we drove through the Shomron. You drive down the spine of the land of Israel, Route 60. We're in Har Gerizim, looking out at Harival, the city of Shechem, the tomb of Joseph, where the blessings and curses took place when Yoshua ben Nun brought the Jewish people in. We were in Shiloh, where the Mishkan was for almost 400 years. To be in Israel is to see the Bible come to life. Joel Lieberman put it best. I heard him speak 2 days ago. He said, God was the first Zionist. And our responsibility is to continue his work. We have the privilege. We have the privilege to be born into a generation that's witnessing the restoration of Am Yisrael to its ancestral homeland. In 1948, there were 6% of Jews living in Israel. Today, almost half the Jews in the world are living in Israel. How sad it is that there's a generation of young Americans growing up today who don't see Israel as a beacon of light in an ocean of darkness, who do not see that it's immoral, not noble, to love the people who are trying to kill your children. For 2,000 years, our ancestors yearned for a return to Israel. We have it now, and 80% of American Jews can't even bring themselves to go and visit the land of Israel. We have to give thanks for the gift of Medinat Israel. We have to be ambassadors for the state of Israel. And I'll end with this. Practically speaking, the Jewish people need to settle all of the land of Israel. And as descendants of Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, world Jewry should do its best to ensure the safety of Jews throughout the land of Israel. Israel faces enough outside criticism and scrutiny. We have to stand together. We have to be unapologetic. We have to find common ground, and we should be inspired by the words of the prophet, Kumi ori ki ba'orech uchvod Adonai alai zarach. Arise and shine, for your light has arrived, and the glory of Hashem shines upon you. Thank you.